Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahanao Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditam Astuma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Tat. So welcome to this continuing series on the Bhagavad Gita, 17th chapter, the threefold faith of things, Stratatraya Vibhaga Yoga. Last week we were talking about the various tapas or austerities, and connected with that, they were also divided into, as usual, one or the other of three evolutionary forces or qualities called gunas, the things that bind us. As we know, that sattva is characteristic of full illumination, characteristic of non-selfishness, non-concern with egocentricity, spirit of generosity, all the noble and selfless qualities we can think of. And this also goes throughout the whole universe, but on the emotional and psychological plane, this is the understanding. And that reflects our spiritual state of affairs. Just to do with egoistic intention and activities, tamas to do with darkness, dullness, ignorance, and laziness. And so everything can be categorized into one of these three sections, with the idea that at any given moment we can pause, not being part and parcel of it, and take stock to see in what condition is the mind currently, what is its frame of reference, what is its frame of activity, and is it predominantly of the sattvic nature or rajasic nature or tamasic nature. So naturally, there's a threefold austerity practiced by steadfast people with the utmost shraddha, the utmost faith. Desiring no fruit, they call sattvika. When we say that sattvika is a property of unselfishness, any activity we're not doing with any form of intention, including meditation. If we sit down and meditate with any understanding that we'll get something from it, or when we sit down and we think we can't construct any form of line of thinking or progress, and we get frustrated. And that frustration itself is expectation of something for the future. We make a complaint. Why does nothing come to me today? Why is my meditation dry? We're expecting something, and as soon as the expectation arrives, it is no longer sattvic. It is now full of self-interest. We want something for ourselves, albeit fairly innocently, but we're on the wrong line. So why should we abandon these fruits of the future or rewards or effects? Because they create anxiety in the mind. Sattva does not create anxiety in the mind. Sattva has the effect of neutralizing all the negative influences in the mind. So naturally, faith becomes sattvika. What does this faith mean? It means unwavering conviction that nature or God as nature is working properly, working as it should. It's faith that all the resources are at our hand and available. It is faith that when we sit and thought arrives in the mind, it comes from the deepest source of consciousness, cosmic mind itself, God. With this unwavering conviction that we are being looked after, that we will always be looked after, then we can then conduct tapas, not to get something, but simply to express something. And the three aspects of tapas were mentioned. Austerity was mentioned. Austerity is a very severe word. Rather, we might think of it as training the mind. And any training that has resistance will naturally be a struggle or seen as a struggle. When we see the great benefits, when we connect with the joyful aspect of this, then it no longer becomes a struggle, no longer becomes a discipline, it becomes an expression of the best. And then what about austerity, which is practiced with an object of gaining respect, honor, and reverence? In every religion, we find outward signs being put. Look at me, look at me. Might be a mark on the forehead or beads around the neck. Or if you're doing some kind of sacred act, looking sideways. Is somebody watching? Oh, put on a holy face. So in every religion, human nature has this aspect to it that sometimes we expect from it. Respect, honor, reverence, and also status. What will people think of me? People might think I'm a very good person. But all of this, of course, is out of tune with how we really feel inside. We know what is the truth. And sattva is essentially a reflection of truth in its most pure and pristine form. And of course, that austerity, which is practiced with a foolish obstinacy, that is, without any flexibility, according to the law, for the sake of law, anything which is self-torture. And I mentioned last week that we find so many different types of religious austerity. In a place called Mauritius, where people are extremely devout, you'll find people dragging chariots along with hooks into their back. We'll find in places like the Philippines, people at Easter time literally having themselves affixed by nails to a cross in order to feel, I suppose, in its genuine form, what Christ felt when he was nailed to the cross. But then why do it in public is the next question we should be asking. So there's an obstinacy about it, there's a self-torture about it, there's an exhibitionism about it. And really, what are we doing? We're destroying God's holy temple, which we call the body. This is called tamasika. All right, let's go on to a different subject now. There is a story, of course, that we find in the Upanishads, the Brihadaranyaka Upanishads. It's a story where the three great creatures of the Lord of Creatures, that you call Prajapati, the creator, having been taught everything in studentship, now ask a final question. Can you please tell me what is further instruction? Can you give us further instruction? Of course, these are characteristic of men, that is humankind, of deities, celestial bodies. All these are children of the Creator. And then, of course, the ashuras, the demons. These type of three beings are said to be there. And the characteristic inherent in these are inherent in us. Earlier in the Bhagavad Gita, we are warned against bhoga and aishwarya. That is enjoyment of the senses, which is out of control, and also power, obsession with power. These are the primary survival instincts of man. And so the celestials, these are symptomatic of those who require self-control. You can imagine a heaven where all the celestials are dancing and singing, having a glorious time, having a party in paradise. Every religion has a version of it. And all the things that we aim for here on earth but didn't get, the holiday that we never got, we put in a post-mortem heaven, and we aspire to that, and we earn the merits of our good actions, and we delight, and we sing, and we pray, and everything is wonderful. In kind of Christian mythology, they issue you with an instrument, a harp or something, musical instrument. They give you a private cloud, and everyone is happy, and the celestial singing takes place. They're all glory and sunshine. You can eat as much as you like. There's all these delightful things are going on without any thought for diet, nutrition, or health, or any of these things. So these are the celestial regions. What do they therefore require? Self-control. Anyway, Prajapati was wise enough not to give further instructions himself. He delegated it to the thunder. And he said, the thunder will give you instructions. So here came the thunder, da. Da. Da is an interesting sound because we can translate it into many different languages. It still comes out da. And so what is that da? And he left it there. Naturally, every person will find what they require. They will try to see their defects and then what is the appropriate instruction for them. So from that one sound, da, came damyata, was one way. Self-control, dam. This was taken by the celestials, the devas. But then datta was the translation made by mankind, because mankind knows that they require charity. They need a generosity of spirit. They are mean to each other. They're full of their egocentricity, and they grab what they can when they can. And so they need a spirit of charity. And then the other one, of course, dayadham, that indicated daya, generosity, giving, charity belongs to man, but compassion is what belongs to the demons. Because of their pursuit of power above all else, and for this reason, mythologically, they fight with the devas. They're always vying for power. And so to counter and neutralize the pursuit of power, then the spirit of compassion is necessary. But these three things all of us require. We all require self-control. We all require compassion, and we all require charity. Some people wonder what is the difference between charity and compassion. Charity is just giving, and if we give it freely, this is the highest kind of giving, is sattva. But if we give it grudgingly or for some kind of ulterior motive, some self-centered motive, then of course this comes under rajasika. If we just don't care, if we're not careful about it, if unthinkingly, mindlessly we just give it away, then this is of course a tamasic variety. So these three varieties, even of charity, are there. Giving away, giving gifts away. So how to get self-control? How to overcome self-interest? How to overcome a lust for power? It indicates now three types of charity. The gift which is made to one who can make no return, with the feeling that it is one's duty to give, which is given at the right place and right time to a worthy person, that gift is held as sattaka. The text goes like this. Datavyam iti yad danam diyate nupakarine deshe kale cha patre cha dat danam sattikam smartam. That gift which is made to one who can make no return. Sometimes we give, and culturally we might say thank you, and we expect that we don't have to return anything. That's a cultural thing among some cultures. I say thank you to you. You're saying, oh, you're writing off returning anything to you. So we have to be careful culturally in some of these things. But imagine the generosity of spirit that says, I'm giving it to you. Sometimes people come to this door and they require something and we give it. And they say, we'll pay you back. We have to tell them, we don't expect anything back. We are freely giving it. If we can give it, we'll give it. And we know that they can't give anything in return. Still they give it. So it's not a commercial prospect. It's nothing to do with bartering. It's nothing to do with marketing or sales or commercialism, nothing like that. It is purely out of the generosity of the heart. And there we find compassion. So we talk of these three das, then we're coming to this aspect of compassion that the demons require. Because if we don't give it freely, if we expect a return, who's got the power? You have a power over somebody. Like the mafia or something that says, I'll give you a protection. Oh, thank you, that's very good. They say, yes, but it'll cost you money. There has to be a return for it. So this brings out this aspect that we have to have in this charity also, in giving, we have to have compassion. And compassion is a feeling. And the feeling comes from our intrinsic nature of love. From pure love, we do it. Anything short of it is love, of course, but love of yourself. So it's one's duty to give because Scripture tells us it's our duty. But we shouldn't just do it because it's our duty, because it's a kind of unwritten scriptural law. We do it because, as humans, we do it out of love and out of compassion. So this 20th stanza, that we do it out of love and compassion, a spirit of generosity, and then the self-control comes in, that it is one's duty to give, and which gives when? At the right place, the right locality, that is deshi, in a fit place, and kali, in the appropriate time. And to a worthy person, that gift is held to sattva. Now, sometimes it's a moral dilemma. What shall we give? Supposing we're in a city, let's say Dublin, and we see somebody who is looking for some money. Should we give in charity, knowing that there are all kinds of organizations dedicated to charitable purposes? Should we give the money to them? They can handle it well, they can channel it well. How should we do it? We have to use a certain amount of judgment. And sometimes we can jump to a wrong conclusion. But other times it's quite obvious. There are obvious moments when somebody will take money, for example, and use it for misuse of their body or mind. A wonderful definition given by Swami Vivekananda, what is morality and ethics? And it's to do with this quality of strength. It's a very, very good way of looking at morality and moral behavior. Supposing something that you do or think weakens another. They weaken another either physically or emotionally or intellectually or certainly spiritually. I will give you an example. You see, there's a golden rule: do unto others as they would have do unto you. There's a universal golden rule that is in different forms told by all religions. Well, it doesn't work, strictly speaking, because if you're a drug addict who relies on heroin, they will say, sure, you have to give heroin to me because I would give heroin to you. And we'd all be very happy. But heroin will weaken you. It weakens you physically. It weakens you mentally. It weakens your whole sleeping cycle. We know the effects of heroin use and heroin addiction, but it also weakens the whole of society. The whole of society has to pay for support, rehabilitation, places to stay if you're homeless. So you can imagine the impact of this, tax money being paid, and all of this is going to support a weakness. Should we support weakness? Should there be institutions that we should support that help this? Should our duty be to strengthen the overall? If it strengthens ourselves and strengthens everybody all inclusively, this is surely the highest moral position. And when you come into subjective moral dilemmas, you need to apply this rule. Very often, people resort to resolving what is a moral issue by looking at a legal system. What is the law? What is the dogma or doctrine of any organization like a church? But what are these based on? There has to be some kind of rationale behind it and some value behind it, some virtue behind it. The highest virtue is strength. This whole Bhagavad Gita is about strength. The whole of Krishna's dialogue with Arjuna is stand up, be strong, yield not to this unmanliness. This weakness is synonymous with ignorance. And in Vedanta, we are trying to overcome ignorance. The antidote is knowledge. It requires strength to be selfless. It requires strength to be generous. It requires strength to control yourself to resist the temptation of power. If we don't have this strength, or if we don't have this moral strength, then we'll get power and misuse it against people rather than for them. So this is a very, very important point that highlights what is Sattva version of generosity and charity. And it involves all these things: self-control, good judgment, and it involves compassion and love. I mention something very often, that when we come across a person, and also I should mention that charity is not just for people. We say sarvabhuta, for all beings, that is animals as well, plants as well. It was Jagadish Chandra Bose that identified how plants themselves are sentient. They feel pain. And there are people who, wanting the best farm produce, will play certain kind of music. In other words, they will take advantage of space and by putting some vibrations in the space that has the same mobilizing effect that we feel in the human. When you have a certain rhythm going on and a certain melody going on, it affects the rate of the heart. It affects the passivity of the mind. That is why many people who want peace of mind, who want to have or get past their tension. I used to do a course, conduct a course, I can still do it, called Past Tension. See, but it wasn't past in the sense of time. It wasn't P-A-S-T. It was get past, P-A-S-S-E-D. Past, get past tension. Play on words. People who do this sometimes use, and you can see YouTube full of it, certain rhythms, certain music that settle the mind, that have the effect on the whole body, the heart, the breathing, everything. Music is a wonderful media for doing this. Sound is a wonderful media. And they insert into this nature's sounds. Nature's sounds are water running. In the previous guided meditation, we made you feel running water, taste it. And if you use the power of imagination and good visualization, you can almost taste the water as it runs over rocks, the streams that run, and all the environment that the stream nourishes, such as flora and fauna and trees and moss and subtle flowers and bird life as well that goes after it. So putting on a sound version of what nature has to offer, bird song. Some people even put on the sound of whales and the sound of the ocean, because it reminds us of breathing. So all of this is psychosymptomatic. It's all relating to the corresponding vibrations within the mind that is registered within the brain. Some people who suffer from insomnia use this technique because it emulates the feeling or the sound of a sleeping person or a rhythmic heart. So we have to introduce this sattvic element even in this aspect of charity and giving. And when a person is there in front of us, it is not just a single physical person or somebody who does not have a history. We all have a history. We have a physical history, biological history. We have a psychological history. When we look on the outside and see what is the physical requirement, we have to take cognizance that everybody has suffered in the past. Some are suffering now physically, and some will suffer in the future. Everybody more or less will suffer in the future. And so this compassion feeling must come. It's a human feeling inserted because our nature is like that. Our nature being pure love, our nature being bliss, our nature being joy. We wish joy for others. We wish happiness for others. We wish the whole world would be peaceful and blissful. This is the sign of a cultured person, one who has exercised these three qualities: self-control, charity, compassion. Second layer would be psychological, as I mentioned. More or less everybody is suffering on this level. Lack of peace of mind. Peace of mind, if you search for it on the Google search, is one of the most searched after kind of subjects on the internet. And then when we penetrate even further, going beyond physical, psychological, emotional, we find there our source of our own being, the Lord of the universe, and compassion, love gives way to a higher love that comes out as adoration. So from love, compassion, adoration, where nothing needs to be changed or added to. This is the highest sattvic position, where we register love in its purity, absolute purity. What about other versions of charity? Because, of course, it comes into these three categories, sattva, rajas, tamas. Yattu pratyupakaratam param udishta va punaha diyate cha pariklishtam taddanam rajasam smritam. And that gift, which is given with a view to receive, in return, I give you if you give me. I love you if you love me. You hate me, I'll hate you back. Or looking for the fruit, some reward. Or again, grudgingly, this is accounted as rajasika. So, when we look at things for a return, we're looking at a future orientation. And when we look at a future orientation, this agitates the mind. All of this process, psychological process. Spiritual life being symptomatic of, or lack of spiritual life being symptomatic of a disturbed mind, a psychological corresponding process has to be applied. So the opposite is there of this charity, this opposite of what we're looking for in these three da. That is generosity of spirit, as I say, that is compassion and self-control. Because you see, if we expect something in return, then we're associating with power. As I mentioned, we have the power. And if you're looking for the result, the fruit, then self-control is gone. And generosity is not there, because the only love that is being exhibited is love of yourself. You want something for yourself. Love is no doubt there, but love for yourself, not love for the other. This therefore is rajasic. This will damage us. This will give us pain. This is associated with weakness and ignorance. And so there's a saying, don't let the left hand know what the right hand's doing. When you give a gift, don't assess it and look at it and peep at it with the other hand. Don't boast about it. Sometimes we'll go along and give somebody in the street something, let's say in the city, and that's a private matter between you and the person that you're giving whatever you gave to. But how many people can resist when they meet up with friends to say, oh, and by the way, I gave this to a beggar on the street. So this is not really a generosity of spirit. Grudgingly is another aspect of it. And you can see the story, the Christmas Carol story of Scrooge there. See, grudgingly they give it. It's a closing thing, selfish thing. So you do it grudgingly, there's no compassion in it at all. The idea, of course, is that there is a sanctity, of course, holiness and goodness in the gifts made without any publicity whatsoever. Don't ask for a plaque on the hospital wall or any of these things. But the Rajasic man is more concerned with publicity than, of course, with sanctity. And actually, he has no mind to part with his possessions, clinging on to them, hanging on to them. there's a huge relief when you drop everything. An exercise that we did not so long ago, when I was with devotees in France, and letting go was a big difficulty for them. So there's a practical exercise you can do to get the idea about it. Any object that you can have, you put it in your hand. If you're left-handed, you put it in left hand. Right hand, put it in the right hand. Close your eyes, imagine that this is all the possessions that you're proud of, all the dusty things that you've accumulated over the years, all the things that you could give away for the benefit of somebody else, but decided that you'd hoard it to yourself. And then just drop it, let it go. With this idea that actually if you really want a flow of abundance to come toward you, you better not hold on to something small, because your hand will not be available to accept billions and millions of abundance, abundant things that can flow to you. So there's a practical aspect to this as well. But the flow, where does it come from? It comes from an understanding that all abundance comes from God's grace flowing. And that will come to you. Even the sattvic person who gives everything away, ungrudgingly, willingly, things will come to him automatically. If you give, you'll be given. If you love, you'll be loved. Unasked, you'll get it. Without intending to get it, you'll get it. Seek ye first the kingdom of heaven, other things will be added unto thee. So that's the point. Then, of course, adesha kale yad dhanam apatrebhyascha diyate asatkritam avadnyatam tat tamasam udaratam. That's some place that is just full of pessimistic vibrations. You know, a long time, of course, is that which is set apart for other things, other activities, such as sleep or attending to your personal requirements. So, such a person, giving at the wrong place and the wrong time, that is completely carelessly, to an unworthy person, that is not discriminating. You give it to somebody who will misuse it for drugs or drink or whatever it is. That's an example of it. Then, without any respect, or if you do it with insult. There's an episode in the life of Holy Mother Sharada Devi where a relative is feeding somebody who happens to be a different caste, low caste, actually Muslim, and throws the chapati at him. Holy Mother says, "What way is this to feed?" and takes it and feeds him herself. "Oh, Mother, you'll lose your caste. This person I'm feeding here is exactly the same child of mine. I'm the mother of this person as much as the General Secretary of the Ramakrishna Math Mission, Swami Sharadananda, my son Sharad." What an equilibrium of the mind. What a wonderful outlook is that. What a generosity of spirit. What compassion. What a mother's compassionate heart she had. So the opposite of that, way the opposite would be, let me throw it at you. I'm going to give it to you. How generous am I? Here, take it, like a dog. The contributions made to public causes due to the pressure from, say, government offices. You have to give something. These are also tamasic in nature. Darkness, the lowest kind of thing. And then finally, what about this kind of giving, which is bribery? You find many countries, particularly in the third world, but you'll find it everywhere. We have this expression, brown envelopes. You'll get somebody issue a brown envelope. Wink on the one side, and the other hand goes, here's an envelope. Don't open it now. When I go off, you open it, and there you find whatever is there. And you happen to casually mention, "Please, can you give me some planning permission?" And here's a small envelope. So all this bribery is there. In Zimbabwe, I used to go through 4 border posts. It took me 2 hours per border post, through Nyamapanda, what we used to call bribes and customs, because the expectation was you'll get through quickly. Instead of waiting 2 hours in the heat, you can get through quickly, but you have to give something. Not so long ago, there was an operation there where, because police were not paid correctly or paid at all, they would stop, and blatantly they would ask you, you give me this, otherwise we give you, you have to pay a fine, or we'll impound your car, put in a compound. You have to go through a lot of paperwork and bureaucracy to claim it. And then whatever offense we give, whatever thing we put on the paper, probably illegible, like carrying a basket in your car, as ridiculous as that. And so people would just pay it. You want to get to the head of a queue somewhere in the civil service, and they say, all right, give me a small token of your loyalty to the civil service, let's call it. So this is also tamasik of the most rotten kind, the most corrosive kind. This kind of giving is a blot on the landscape of many, many nations. So, yajna, dana, tapas, these 3 things are the holiest things that we can do. That is worship. Worship expresses compassion and love. And then this charity, this giving, this dana is there. So worship, charity, worship called yajna, not just ceremonial worship. We covered that previously. These different types of worship are there, but worship from the heart. And dana, that is giving, and then finally tapas, this austerity. It's another way of saying these 3 things. Tapas, working in reverse, self-control, and then compassion, or charity, I should say, and compassion. So that's a very important thing. These 3 aspects are very important. Then, of course, these are all the holiest things of all activities, but even they have a tinge of evil, of course, inherent in them. And how can these be rectified is a very, very important question. And so the answer comes to us, and is a different subject matter then. So what the subject matter is to do with a phrase. It's a very, very significant phrase. It's a simple phrase containing only 3 sounds, only 3 words. Om, Tat, Sat. Very simple, but very profound in meaning. And it shows how we can actually take demerits and transform them, turn them into merits. How? By repeating these things, but understanding the meaning. Repeating these things without the meaning would be something like listening to a language, a foreign language, and not understanding the content, but it's sweet to the ears. Some benefit is there, no doubt. But I surely have to understand what they mean. And this is where the Bhagavad Gita comes and tells us these are the reasons why these 3 words are significant and are important. These 3 mantras. Om Tat Sat Iti Niyadesho Brahmanas Tri Vidaha Smartaha Brahmanas Tena Vedascha Yajnascha Vihitaha Pura. This Om Tat Sat, thus, this designated, this has been declared to be the triple designation of Brahman. That is the highest supreme principle that we call Brahman. This Godhead, the entity that transcends all, that is itself the sum totality of everything. These 3 words summarize this. And why should it be so? We can analyze each one. And by these 3 were made of old, that is prehistory, from the beginning of time, if you will, the scriptures. Scriptures identified as the Brahmanas, That is, that section that explains the mantras used in this yajna. What is the relationship between this and the previous passage? Worship. Worship technically called yajna. So how do we do this? We do this because these rituals and prayers and explanations of these rituals, they all come from this one Brahman, this one sound, these three Om Tat Sat. By that were made of old these Brahmanas, that portion of the Vedas themselves, that is all the scriptural truths that come to us, all the knowledge that we have, both in physics, in science, in cosmology, in how to get abundance here and hereafter, and also how to conduct your life in a meritorious way, and how to transcend this life that we have. So the Vedas and the Yajnas, in other words, the formulas that we have, scriptural formulas, and the methods of carrying them out, the expressions of them. Now, this requires quite a lengthy explanation, and it's very profound. And actually, we're almost coming to the end of this particular chapter. But we need to dwell on this. Of course, we all understand what Om is, or we think we understand. If you ask the question, what does Om mean? Sometimes you get varied answers. Sometimes people say, I don't know. But what we do know is that every one of these three things, that is, every ritual that is done, every prayer that is recited, every worship that is conducted, is preceded by at least Om. Not only in the Vedic system, which we call Hinduism popularly, but also in Buddhism, also in Jainism, and also in its own way, Sikhism. They all value highly this sound symbol Om as the first, nearest symbolic sound that man can utter that represents and replicates this first primordial movement, creative movement, that we call a cosmic mind, that emanates from the cosmic mind, what we call Vak or word, or we can say in Neoplatonism, Logos or Nous. That first expression, we find it in the Christian John's Gospel. In the beginning was the Word. So this primordial Logos, its sound as heard by the inner ear of the yogis, the inner ear of the mystics, is equivalent to our gross form, this vibration Om. And in this Mandukya Upanishad, we find an extensive explanation of this Om. Only 12 verses are there, but it tells us what this Om is. It tells us in the language of our experience. Our experience that we register as objective consciousness is in three varieties. A waking state now that registers an individuality with all these other components, body, mind, and so on. And also the understanding of the objective universe in terms of other places, other scenes, other events, other people, and then our relationship to it. And all our struggles and difficulties are registered in that quarter. But another quarter is there. Another aspect is there. A second aspect is there, where these components are there, but many egos are there. And we find scenes, we find replications of names and forms that we saw in the waking state, but in different formats and still register as real because still having causal connections, still having time and space. At the time of dreaming, we register it as real. And then there's a causal element that goes with it. The most causal element has none of these, no time, no space, no individuality, only a sense of peace, infinite peace is there. We can put it in a different language. God's standing there doing nothing. When God decides to move a little bit, we can call it a dream. And when God decides to register himself in familiar forms and interpretations, where we set up a play and register them as problems and difficulties instead of joys and scenes, instead of enacting games and roles, put them into a different category. And so, how do we resolve these issues? By understanding that behind that is a subtle area which is less precise, where great imagination can take place, where expressions of creativity can be there. We call it dream. And that there's a causal connection there. And when we go to that causal area and stand in a poised moment, then this surely is the highest area of potential for our creativity. But that aside, all of these three aspects are the sum totality of consciousness that we call Om. And when we register it, we've registered this sum totality, but it's not complete. A silence that follows will indicate the transcendent aspect. This is sometimes called the Nada Brahman, the sound expression. Every time a necessity arises for the indication of Brahman, these three words, not just Om, but Om Tat Sat. Tat means that existence. It says here, it says now. It doesn't put you in the future. It doesn't take you back to the past. And the only thing that is here and now is this Brahman. By registering Tat as opposed to this, all of this, the ancient sages would have registered with a wave of the hands, indicating the whole world of moving things, things which are ephemeral, things which are not lasting. These are summarized as this, pointing to the outside. But when you say that, you're talking of here, you're talking of now. The now comes in Sat. Sat registers itself as many meanings, but essentially it is your fundamental nature of existence itself. Now, existence is a question. When the body dies, is there existence after or non-existent? This is a question that is actually posed. But if you have something that is non-existent, how will you get existence from it? The logic doesn't carry forward. So Sat means existence itself, life itself. It is the reason why we want to exist. It's the reason why we try to exist. It's the fundamental nature of struggle and survive to exist at all costs. Why we resist the whole mortal end. Mortality is a great concern, but only a concern when it's near. Near in the sense of somebody experienced it, near to us. Or with advancing age, how we see on the horizon the possibility. Who will carry the coffin? Who will bury me? Did I get enough insurance for it? All of these people bring these issues up, but they don't like it because the very clinging to life is based on this whole understanding of I exist. But try to think of yourself as non-existent. It's not possible. It's beyond our range and our scope. We are not designed to think in this way because we are always perpetually existent. That existence is there on account of our fundamental nature of existence itself. All right. So Om Tat Sat are utilized either together or severally, and Brahman, that is the highest supreme principle, projects himself as sound for the purpose of manifesting himself as the phenomenal universe. Without this Om vibration, no other vibration arises, and the whole of the universe can be seen as a series of vibrations. If we think that this world is a play of waves, it will change our whole outlook. But where are these waves coming from? A primordial movement. We can register everything to that. It changes our outlook. It changes our internal structure that we call the unconscious mind. And it changes our behavior. as exhibited now in these three important things, and that is worship, employing the heart, charity, employing the hands, compassion, also employing the heart, employing self-control, and then tapas, that is austerity, employing this self-control necessary for us. So we can call this nada Brahman, nada sound, this Brahman of sound, sacred sound, interminable. And so Brahman is therefore referred to by this utterance of Om. When we say Om, we mean Brahman. It's the same thing. Also, of course, indicated by the word Tat, which means it or that. A respectable person is not referred to by his name, but we simply call that person he. And so, but in deference to all these distinctions, Brahman is indicated with a neutral word, and that is neutrally it or that. Again, Sat means the reality, which remains unaffected by time, space, and causation. If we have an understanding that our goal is freedom, then we have to understand that the fundamental nature would be this existence itself. And though both butter, for example, and buttermilk come from the same substance that is milk, we only say that butter comes from milk and makes no mention of any other substance. And though all things and beings have come out from this Brahman, this one entity, this source, the most prominent productions among them are these three things that were mentioned in the text: the Brahmanas, the Vedas, and the Yajnas. The most spiritually inclined ones among men are called also the Brahmanas. It's not a caste, it's just the nose of Brahman in its original form. So we can ask, how is this triple designation, this Om Tat Sat, how can it be utilized in practice? So it says, Tasmat Om Ityo Udartya Yajna Dana Tapaha Kriyaha Pravartante Vidanoktaha Satatam Brahmavadinam. Therefore, with the utterance of this Om are the acts of sacrifice, gifts, and austerity, these three things necessary: worship, charity, and self-control, as enjoined in the scriptures, always undertaken by the followers of the Vedas. These also tend to remove obstacles. So Om is designated as also synonymous with Vigneshwara, the remover of obstacles. When we look at Ganesha, Ganesha is a kind of form embodiment of this Om because it removes obstacles. Its primary form, if you will, is cosmic mind. This abstract form is their cosmic mind, the only mind we have. And if we are able to stand where the cosmic mind or God stands, we remove all obstacles. Then uttering Tat without aiming at the fruits of the acts of sacrifice, austerity, and the various acts of gifts performed by the seekers of moksha, says the text, Tad itya anabhi samdhaya param yajna tapaha kriyaha dana kriyascha vividha griyante moksha kantakshpihi. Uttering this Tat without aiming at the fruits, because Tat means that it's not only it, but it means here as well in this context. It refers to Brahman. See, all actions belong to God, not to us. Although we register them to us, as we mentioned previously, they should all be registered to Him. So if you do this, do these three things with freedom in mind as a goal, moksha, then such a one attains this Brahmanhood, and this moksha, this freedom. But what about the word Sat? Sadbhave, sadhu bhave cha, sad ityate prayujyate, prashaste karmani tata, sachabdha partha yujyate. This word Sat is used in the sense of reality and of goodness. And so also, O Partha, says Krishna, the word sat is used in the sense of an auspicious act. So this, in Sanskrit, these words have all different levels of meanings, obviously, subtlety of meanings. But Brahman alone is Sat, existence itself, pure existence itself. And therefore, it is reality. If something appears and disappears, we can't really register it as reality. Our mistake is we do. If something changes from one moment to the next, we can't really say this is reality, yet we register it as such. This is called ignorance. When we register the reality underlying all of this, this is called Sat, existence itself. We can, in our common expression, call it the source of life. When we say Sat Chit Ananda, we put it in kind of English conceptual terms, we can say the source of life. The source of light is pure consciousness. The source of light and the source of love is bliss, our blissful nature. Sat Chit Ananda, we can say. And the word Sat is used in benediction, approbation, sanction. So it's used for any auspicious act. Now, are there any other purposes for which this word Sat is used? Yajne tapase dane cha stitihi sad iti ko chaye. Karma chayva tadartiyam sadityeva vidiyate. This steadfast in worship or sacrifice, steadfast in tapas, austerity, that is self-control, and gift, charity. These also are called Sat because they are Sattvika, pure. And action for the sake of the Lord is also called Sat. That is, there's a formula for those who aim for moksha, previously mentioned. Now there's a formula for the devotee, those who are bhaktas. So you can do all these actions, understanding this purity of Sat, doing all actions for the sake of the Lord, offering all actions as offerings to the Lord, either before an activity or after activity, or before and after, or before and after and during. And at least at the end of the day, taking all your activities, gathering together and offering them to the Lord. Lord, these belong to you. They don't belong to me whatsoever. So this dana and tapas are dominated really by the thought of tat, but the performance of the same three sacred acts here is dominated by the thought of sat. Dana and tapas dominated by tat, here and now, and sat then to do with existence self. We can say also it's the spatial element. Ashrathaya hutam datam tapastaptam kritam chahyat asad itya uchite partha nachatat pritya no iha. Whatever is sacrificed, whatever is given or performed, and whatever austerity is practiced without this shraddha, without this faith, without this surety, it is called asat, the opposite of sat. It is called a non-reality. It is of no account, either here or hereafter. It has no meaning to it whatsoever. It's without importance and it's without effectiveness. So this worship, charity, that is giving, self-control, when performed well, all these lead the spiritual aspirant, the sadhaka, into God consciousness. But correspondingly, his individualistic consciousness is eliminated. But if these good acts be done with selfish motive, that is rajasic, the man's individualism develops. And the individualism is the difficulty. It brings all your problems. See, machines make no progress for themselves. Through their working, they merely wear out. But the person who has faith, this intrinsic shraddha, becomes an automaton or machine because he says, "You, Lord, carry me." That kind of faith is there. A let-go attitude that says, "I am happy for you to carry me. Let me enter into a flow of life." You being flowing grace, always there, always present, always existent, and yet not discriminatory in any way. That is, it is neutral and neutral, not biased in any way. And the source of you is this pure Om. So we finish off the entire chapter now. Iti Srimad Bhagavad Gita Upanishatsu Brahma Vidyayam Yoga Shastre Shri Krishnarjun Samvade Shraddhatraya Vibhaga Yoga Nam Saptadaso Dhyaya. In the Upanishad of this Bhagavad Gita, knowledge of Brahman, supreme science of yoga, and the dialogue between Sri Krishna, Arjuna. This is the 17th discourse designated this Shraddhatraya Vibhaga Yoga, this yoga of threefold Shraddha or faith. This leads us, of course, to the last chapter, which we'll pick up next week, which is the Moksha Sannyas Yoga, and summarizes the entire teaching extremely comprehensively and thoroughly. With these, we leave off this evening's session. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all.